I thought I was alone on the night shift until the reflection moved behind me. I took the night shift at Martin Cross Services because I was skint, plain and simple. That was the honest reason. People always act like there has to be some bigger story behind why you end up working alone in a petrol station off a half-forgotten road in North Yorkshire. But there wasn't, not at first anyway. I was 28. I dropped out of teacher training halfway through the year, and by then, I was too embarrassed to move back in with my mom and too broke to be choosy. The station manager said the overnight rate was better than the daytime one, and I remember pretending to think it over like I had options. I took it on the spot. Martin Cross wasn't on a motorway or anything busy like that. It sat off Blackmere Road, just beyond the town boundary where the houses thinned out and the fields took over. In the daytime, it looked miserable enough, but at night, it felt properly cut off. You had a small forecourt with 4 pumps, a squat little shop with humming fridges and cheap sandwiches, a car wash that hadn't worked in years, and beyond that, just darkness and wet hedgerows. If you stood by the till and looked out through the front glass after midnight, it felt less like you were working in a shop and more like you were sitting in a lit box someone had left in the middle of nowhere. I honestly thought I'd get used to it quicker than I did. The first few shifts were the worst because every sound seemed personal. The buzz from the strip lights overhead, the fridge motors kicking in all at once, rain ticking against the windows like someone trying their nails on the glass. Even the automatic doors had this soft mechanical sigh when they opened that made me jump if I wasn't expecting it. It was embarrassing, really. You tell yourself you're a grown man and it's just a petrol station. But at 3 in the morning, with no cars on the road and no other voice in the building, your brain starts working against you. Every shadow looks occupied. Every quiet moment feels like it's waiting for something. Most nights follow the same pattern. A burst of customers around 10, a lull, then the odd taxi driver, a lorry bloke, someone buying energy drinks and Rizlas at 1:30. After 2, it often went dead for an hour or more. That was always the longest stretch. I'd wipe down the coffee machine even when it was already clean, restock shelves that didn't need restocking, and glance at the CCTV monitor far more often than I needed to. There were 6 camera feeds in a square above the cigarette cabinet. Forecourt, entrance, aisle 1, aisle 3, stockroom door, and rear delivery area. I used to tell myself checking them was just part of the job. Truthfully, it made me feel less alone. It was about 3 weeks in when I first noticed the man in the wax jacket. At first, there was nothing dramatic about him. That's what bothered me later. If he'd looked wild or obviously dangerous from the start, maybe I would have remembered more. Maybe I would have done something differently. But he just looked like one of those blokes you get around rural towns. Lean, rough round the edges, face a bit hollow, clothes that had once been decent and had then gone too long without being washed properly. He always came late, usually somewhere between 1:15 and 2. Always on his own. Always bought nearly the same things. Cheese and onion crisps, a sausage roll if there were any left, sometimes a bottle of Lucozade, and once a packet of mint imperials he never opened. What made him stand out was how quickly he moved, not in a normal rushed way either. More like a man who didn't want to be inside any building longer than necessary. He'd come through the automatic doors, already looking over his shoulder, grab what he needed, and head straight to the till with the exact money in his hand. Not once did he ask how much something cost. Not once did he fumble for change. He seemed to know before I scanned anything. He never made conversation, which I didn't mind, but he also never really looked at me properly. His eyes flicked past me, to the window, to the door, to the road. Then he'd leave. After the 3rd or 4th visit, I started expecting him. Not because I liked him, just because in a place like that you latch onto patterns. A regular customer becomes proof that the night is unfolding the way it's meant to. I'd see his shape crossing the forecourt and think, right, there he is, same as always. And every time he left, I'd find myself watching him longer than I did anyone else. The odd thing was, I never got a good look at what he drove. That sounds stupid, because the forecourt was bright enough and the pumps were right outside, but he had a habit of pulling up just beyond the nearest camera angle or stopping for only a second before leaving again. I remembered a dark vehicle, maybe a pickup, maybe some older estate, but I was never sure. It became one of those tiny annoying details my mind kept snagging on. Not important enough to mention, still wrong enough to stay with me. There was another thing as well. He always looked shattered, but not drunk. Not like he was off his face either, just deeply, painfully tired, the sort of tired that had settled into his bones. His eyes had that flat, sleepless look some people get, where they seem wide awake and half dead at the same time. Once, when I handed over his receipt and our fingers brushed by accident, his hand was freezing. Not cold from the weather. I mean properly icy, like he'd been standing outside for hours. Long night? I asked him that once, just trying to be normal. He looked at me like I'd said something stupid, then took his stuff and walked straight out. After that, I stopped trying. By early November, the weather had turned filthy. Not picturesque rain, not the sort you get in films. Proper Yorkshire rain, cold and relentless, blown sideways across the forecourt by wind that seemed to come from all directions at once. It made the whole place feel even more isolated. Headlights would appear around the bend in the road, smear across the wet tarmac, then vanish again, leaving everything black beyond the station canopy. On quieter shifts, I found myself listening for engines before I saw them, because the sight of another car, any car, was weirdly comforting. One Thursday night, I was on with a flask of stale coffee and a headache just behind my eyes from not sleeping properly. I'd had a text from my ex earlier in the evening about the last of my things still being at her flat, and I'd spent most of the shift trying not to think about what a mess my life had become in under a year. That probably didn't help. When you're already worn thin, little things get under your skin faster. Business had been dead since midnight. Just one white van driver buying chewing gum and two school-aged lads who came in dripping wet and tried to nick vape cartridges. By 1:30, the road was empty again. I was standing behind the till, pretending to read a local paper someone had left behind when I saw movement at the edge of the forecourt. It was him. Same jacket, same thin frame, same slightly forward lean in the shoulders, like he was bracing against a wind that other people couldn't feel. But what struck me straight away was that he hadn't come in from a vehicle. He was just there suddenly, walking in from the dark beyond the pumps. I straightened up without even realizing I'd done it. For a second, I thought maybe his car was parked awkwardly off to the side, but no. The forecourt was empty except for him. No headlights on the road, no engine noise fading away, nothing. Just this man emerging from the black edge of the place as if the night had spat him out. The automatic doors parted and he stepped inside. Water dripped from the hem of his jacket onto the tiles. His hair was plastered to his forehead. One sleeve was muddy up to the elbow, and when he turned slightly under the strip lights, I saw that the side of his face was bruised badly enough to make my stomach tighten. Not a fresh injury exactly, but not old either. There was a split on his lower lip and dried blood in the corner of his mouth. I nearly asked him if he was all right, but something about him stopped me. Not aggression, not even hostility. He just had this look people get when they are using the last bit of themselves to stay upright. Like if anyone spoke to him too directly, the whole act might collapse. Instead of going to the food fridge, he stopped dead just inside the entrance and looked around the shop, slowly, methodically, not like a customer deciding what to buy, more like he was checking who else might be there. "It's just me tonight," I said, and I don't even know why I said it. Maybe because the silence felt too thick. Maybe because I wanted to reassure him. Or maybe I was trying to reassure myself. He looked at me then. Really looked at me for the first time since I'd known him. His eyes were bloodshot, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how alert he seemed despite how exhausted he looked. That kind of raw alertness you see in an animal that's been cornered too many times. He opened his mouth slightly as if he was about to say something, then stopped. His gaze flicked past my shoulder toward the rear of the shop, then up to the CCTV monitor, then back to the doors. But then everything seemed fine, like nothing would happen. He moved off at last, heading not to the drinks or the hot food, but to aisle 3, where we kept batteries, torches, maps no one bought, and all the random bits you'd only grab if you were desperate. He stood there with his back half turned to me, not touching anything, just standing. I tried to act normal. I wiped an already clean patch of counter with blue roll and listened to the rain battering the canopy outside. A lorry should have come through around then, I remember thinking. Or a taxi. Anyone. Instead, there was only the hum of the fridges, the distant rattle of a loose sign somewhere outdoors, and the sound of the man's wet sleeve brushing against packaging as he shifted his weight in the aisle. A full minute went by, then another. I glanced out through the front glass, expecting at any second to see someone else pull in. Maybe that was why he was nervous. Maybe he'd had a row with someone. Maybe he was hiding from a fight. But the road was empty in both directions, shining black under the rain. No approaching lights, no movement at all. That was when I noticed the payphone. It stood near the edge of the forecourt by the bin enclosure, one of those old units no one had got round to removing yet. Most people ignored it. I barely thought about it myself, but now the receiver was hanging slightly crooked, swaying a little in the wind, just enough to catch the light. I stared at it for a moment, trying to remember if it had looked like that earlier in the night. I couldn't say. Still, it put this weird little pinch of unease in my chest. When I looked back inside, the man had moved closer to the front windows. He wasn't looking at the shelves anymore. He was looking out at the darkness beyond the pumps, same as me. I said, "You need me to ring someone?" The question came out softer than I meant it to. Not nosy, just careful. He flinched. It was small, but I saw it. His shoulders tensed, and his head turned sharply toward me, eyes wide in a way that made him suddenly look much younger and much more frightened than I'd realized. For one mad second, I thought he was going to run behind the counter and grab me. Instead, he took one step back, then another, and his gaze fixed on the window again, as if he'd seen something outside I couldn't. "What is it?" I asked. He shook his head once, quick, almost angry. Then he walked to the door, not fast at first, but with that same held-together urgency I'd noticed before. The door slid open. Cold air rushed in with the rain. He paused on the threshold like he was listening for something, then stepped out and crossed the forecourt without looking back. I went to the glass and watched him. He didn't head for a car because there wasn't one. He walked past Pump 4, then past the bins, then to the very edge of the lit area where the tarmac met the black line of the road and the hedges beyond it. For one moment, he was fully visible under the canopy lights, soaked and thin and obviously hurt. Then he kept going into the darkness until I lost him. I stood there longer than I should have, waiting to hear a door slam or an engine start. Nothing, just rain. What I didn't expect was how much that bothered me. If he'd arrived on foot from town, fair enough, though it would have been a miserable walk and a strange time to do it. But Martin Cross wasn't near enough to anything for it to make sense. Not in that weather, not at that hour, and certainly not in the state he was in. I remember looking down at the wet tiles where he'd stood and feeling this stupid crawling sensation at the back of my neck, like I'd missed something obvious. I should have left it there. I should have gone back behind the till, finished my shift, and let the whole thing become one more odd encounter you tell people about later. But curiosity gets hold of you in quiet places. That's the truth of it. When nothing happens for hours, one strange thing feels bigger than it should. So I unlocked the side staff door, stepped out under the awning, and walked to where he crossed the forecourt. The rain hit me straight away, icy and sharp. I looked towards the road, then down at the wet ground. There were footprints, muddy ones, deep enough to show clearly on the pale concrete near the air machine. They came from the direction of the road and crossed toward the station. I followed them with my eyes, expecting to see the line continue back out again. It didn't. The prints reached the forecourt, stopped near the entrance doors, and that was it. I actually stood there in the rain for a few seconds trying to make sense of that, telling myself the rest had been washed away, or I was looking at it wrong, or maybe I was more tired than I thought. But even then, before anything properly bad had happened, before I knew any of their names or how far it would go, I had this horrible quiet feeling that the night had shifted around me somehow. Not dramatically, not all at once, just enough that when I went back inside and the automatic doors side shut behind me, the shop no longer felt like somewhere I worked. It felt like somewhere I'd been left. I told myself it was just the rain. That was the explanation I kept coming back to as I dried my hands on a bit of blue roll and tried to shake off the feeling that something about those footprints hadn't been right. Rain does strange things to the ground. It fills in gaps, washes edges away, makes things look incomplete. That's what I went with. It was easier than standing there at 2 in the morning, thinking about how a man could walk into a place and not seem to leave it the same way. But even after I locked the side door and went back behind the till, I couldn't quite settle. It was subtle at first. The sort of thing you wouldn't mention out loud because it sounds ridiculous. The hum of the fridges felt louder than before, like it had crept up a notch without warning. The lights seemed harsher. The reflection in the glass doors showed too much of the shop behind me, making it feel like I wasn't just watching the outside anymore, like the outside could just as easily be watching in. I picked up my phone, meaning to scroll through something and distract myself, but I ended up just staring at the CCTV monitor again. Everything looked normal. Forecourt empty, entrance clear, aisles still, rear door shut. But then everything always looks normal on those screens, even when it isn't. I don't know how long I stood there before I heard it, the sound of the front doors opening again. That soft mechanical sigh. I turned immediately, expecting to see a customer stepping inside, shaking off their coat, maybe calling out a quick "all right." But there was no one there. The doors were still half open, letting in a thin line of cold air and the sound of rain. Beyond them, the forecourt sat empty under the lights, glistening and still. "Hello?" I called, louder than I meant to. No answer. I stepped out from behind the counter and walked halfway across the shop, my trainers sticking slightly to the damp patches on the floor where people had tracked in water earlier. I could feel my heartbeat a bit more than usual. Not racing, just present. "Shop's open," I said, as if that might explain anything. Still nothing. I reached the entrance and leaned slightly to look outside. The rain had eased a bit, but the air was thick with that cold damp you get after a heavy downpour. I scanned the pumps, the bins, the road. No one. I stayed there a second longer than I should have, then stepped back inside. The doors slid shut behind me with a quiet click. I stood still for a moment. Then I laughed, just once, under my breath. "Wind," I said to myself. That's all it is. The thing about working nights is you get good at making excuses for things. You have to. Otherwise, every little noise becomes something bigger than it is. So I went back behind the till, picked up my phone again, and tried to pretend everything was exactly as it had been an hour ago. But it wasn't, because a few minutes later, it happened again. This time I didn't hear the doors so much as feel them. That shift in the air. That slight change in pressure. I looked up instantly. The doors were open, wide this time. And again, no one there. I didn't move straight away. I just stared at them, my brain doing that slow, stubborn thing where it tries to line up what you're seeing with what makes sense, even when it doesn't quite fit. "All right," I muttered, more to break the silence than anything else. I walked over again, slower this time. When I got close, I noticed something I hadn't before. The floor just inside the doors was wet. Not unusual on a night like that, but there were marks in it, not clear footprints like outside, more like smudges, dragged water, as if someone had stepped in, hesitated, then shifted their weight without fully walking forward. I crouched slightly, trying to make them out better, and that was when I heard it. A dull, solid thump from somewhere at the back of the building. I froze. It wasn't loud, not like something crashing to the ground, just deliberate, like a hand or shoulder pressing once against a door. I stayed crouched there for a second, listening. Nothing followed. No footsteps. No movement. Just the steady hum of the fridges and the faint rattle of rain on the roof. I straightened slowly and turned my head toward the back corridor that led to the stockroom and delivery entrance. From where I stood, I couldn't see all the way down it. Just the first stretch, lit by the same harsh white lighting as the shop floor. The rest disappeared around a corner. "It's probably the freezer," I said quietly. The words didn't convince me. I walked back behind the counter, more because it felt like the safest place than anything else, and pulled the CCTV monitor closer. My fingers felt a bit stiff as I tapped the screen to bring up the rear camera. For a second, the image flickered, then steadied. There he was, a man standing right outside the delivery door. My chest tightened so quickly, it actually hurt. He was close enough to the camera that I could see the outline of his hood and the shape of his shoulders, but his face was turned slightly away, hidden in shadow. One hand rested flat against the metal push bar, just like I'd heard. The other hung at his side. He wasn't moving, not even slightly. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting as if that would help. "Mate?" I said under my breath, even though he couldn't hear me. Still nothing. The longer I looked, the worse it felt. Not because he was doing anything aggressive. Quite the opposite. It was the stillness. The fact that he was just there, waiting. I switched to the front camera feed and rewound the footage, my thumb sliding too fast at first, then slower as I found the right moment. There, the doors opening on their own. Except they weren't opening on their own. He was there too. The same man walked up to the entrance, pushed the door open just enough to trigger the sensor, then immediately stepped back out of view. A second later, he ran along the side of the building toward the rear. I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. I rewound again. Same thing, just minutes earlier. Open door, no entry. Movement toward the back. He wasn't trying to come in. He was checking, testing, seeing how I'd react. I sat back slowly, the chair creaking under me. "Right," I said, though my voice had gone quieter than I meant it to. "Right." My eyes flicked back to the rear camera. He hadn't moved, hands still on the door, head slightly angled, waiting. I don't mind admitting that was the moment I actually felt afraid. Not jumpy, not uneasy, proper fear, because it wasn't random anymore. He knew I was here, and whatever he was planning, he was taking his time with it. I reached for the phone behind the counter, my hand hovering over it for a second, as if I was still deciding whether I was overreacting. But then another thump came from the back door, harder this time. And on the screen, the man finally moved. He turned and started running. He moved faster than I thought he could. 1 second he was just a shape on the screen, stood there like he'd been nailed into place. The next, he turned sharply and bolted out of frame, his arm dragging across the door as he went. The camera shook slightly from the impact, and then he was gone. I didn't even realize I'd picked up the phone until I heard my own voice already speaking. "Yeah. Hi. Sorry, I'm at Martin Cross Services, just off Blackmere Road, and there's a man outside trying the doors, I think. He's been..." My words were tripping over each other. I had to stop, take a breath, and force myself to slow down. "He's been checking the building," I said, more clearly this time. "Front and back. He hasn't come in, but he's not leaving." The operator started asking questions, what he looked like, whether he had a weapon if anyone else was with me, but I was only half listening, because I could hear something, not through the phone, from the shop, footsteps, fast ones. I turned just as the automatic doors at the front shuttered open with a force I'd never seen before. Not that soft mechanical glide, this was violent. The panels slammed apart like someone had hit them at speed. And then he was inside. I don't think I'll ever forget how sudden it felt. There was no build-up, no moment to prepare. 1 second I was talking to the police about a man outside, and the next he was sprinting straight at me across the shop floor. He wasn't shouting. That was the worst part. If he'd been yelling or threatening, I could have reacted properly. But he was silent, moving hard and fast, eyes locked on me like I was the only thing in the room. I dropped the phone. It clattered against the counter, the operator's voice still coming faintly through the speaker as I stumbled back a step, instinct taking over before thought had a chance to catch up. "Oi, stop!" I said, and it sounded ridiculous the second it left my mouth. He didn't stop. He reached the counter in seconds, hands slamming down on the surface as he leaned over it slightly, breathing hard. Up close, he looked worse than on the cameras. Mid-30s maybe, but drawn tight in the face, skin pale under the strip lights, eyes wide in a way that didn't match the rest of him. Not drunk, not even angry, exactly, just wrong, like whatever was going on in his head wasn't lining up with the room around him. For a split second, we just stared at each other. And then, just like that, he broke eye contact. His head snapped to the side like he'd heard something I hadn't. "Don't," he muttered. It wasn't to me. I'm sure of that now. Don't, don't do that. His voice was low and uneven, like he was arguing with someone under his breath. He stepped back from the counter and turning in a tight circle as if trying to track something moving around him. What are you doing? I said, my voice coming out tighter than I meant it to. Mate, you need to calm down. He ignored me completely. Instead, he ran. Not out the front the way he came in, to the back. He moved so suddenly it caught me off guard again, knocking into one of the display stands as he went, sending packets of crisps spilling onto the floor. He didn't even look at them, just kept going, straight down the corridor toward the stockroom. There was a heavy bang as he hit the door. Once, twice, 3 times, each impact louder than the last. Stop, I shouted, coming around the counter now, heart hammering in my chest. You can't go back there. Another crash, then silence. I reached the entrance to the corridor and stopped dead. The door to the stockroom hung slightly ajar, the frame splintered where he'd forced it. Beyond it, the light flickered once, then steadied again. Hello? I called, and even to my own ears it sounded like I didn't want an answer. Nothing. I stood there, every part of me telling me not to go any further. But then the operator's voice cut back in from the phone behind me, louder now in the quiet. Sir, are you still there? Units are on the way. Can you confirm your safety? I swallowed hard. Yeah, I said, forcing the word out. Yeah, I'm still here. He's gone into the back. Do not approach, she said immediately. Stay where you are. Officers are close. I didn't argue. I took 2 steps back from the corridor, then 3 more, until I was behind the counter again. My hands were shaking now, properly shaking, and I pressed them flat against the surface to steady them. Every second stretched. I kept expecting another noise, another crash, footsteps coming back toward me, but there was nothing. Just that same awful quiet. 5 minutes doesn't sound like a long time until you're waiting in it like that. When the police finally arrived, the sound of tires on wet tarmac and doors slamming outside felt almost unreal, like something breaking through the tension rather than part of it. 2 officers came in first, one of them speaking quickly into a radio while the other scanned the shop. Where is he? Back there, I said, pointing toward the corridor. He forced the door. They moved straight past me without another word, hands already near their belts as they approached the stockroom. A 3rd officer joined them at the door. Then they went inside. I stayed where I was. I didn't want to see what they found. Didn't want to hear it either. But you don't get a choice with that sort of thing. There was a pause. Then one of them said, Sir, stay where you are. Another voice, sharper this time. Drop it. Now. A scuffle. A grunt. And then, knife! My stomach dropped. There was a heavy thud, bodies shifting, something clattering across the floor. Down! Get him down! More movement, more noise. Then finally, got him! Silence followed, broken only by heavy breathing and the faint crackle of a radio. A minute later, one of the officers came back out into the shop, his expression tight but controlled. He's been restrained, he said. You all right? I nodded, though it didn't feel like it. What was he doing, I asked. The officer hesitated for a second, then glanced back toward the stockroom. Standing in the corner, he said, talking to himself. I stared at him. That's it? He gave a small, humorless shake of his head. No, he said, not quite. Another officer appeared behind him, holding something carefully in a gloved hand. A knife. Not a big one, kitchen size, but real enough. He had this, the officer said. Didn't respond to us at first. Didn't even seem to know we were there. My throat felt dry. He ran in here like he was after me, I said. He came straight at me. Did he touch you? No. Say anything, I hesitated. He said, don't, I said slowly. But I don't think he meant me. The officers exchanged a look. Behind them, I could see the man now, just a glimpse through the open stockroom door. He was on the floor, restrained, still moving slightly, his head turned toward the wall. His lips were moving, still whispering. I couldn't hear the words. But I knew, somehow, they weren't meant for anyone in that room. And that was the moment it really hit me. Not the running, not the door, not even the knife. It was the way none of it felt like it had anything to do with me at all. Like I'd just been standing in the wrong place, while something else, something I couldn't see or understand, played out around me. And whatever that was, it wasn't finished yet. After they took him away, the shop didn't feel real anymore. That's the only way I can explain it. Everything looked the same. The same shelves, the same lights, the same cheap plastic signs hanging slightly crooked above the fridges. But it all felt off, like I'd stepped back into a place that only looked like the one I'd been in before. One of the officers stayed behind to take my statement. He was older than the others, calm in that way people get when they've seen too many strange situations to react to them properly anymore. He asked me to go through everything from the beginning. When I first noticed the man outside, what I saw on the cameras, what he did when he came in. I told him all of it. The doors opening on their own, the way the man had been testing the building, the sprint toward the counter, the way he'd stopped, like something had distracted him. And then that moment, his voice, quiet and strained, saying don't to something that wasn't there. The officer wrote it all down without interrupting, just nodding occasionally, like none of it surprised him. Was he drunk? I asked when I'd finished. The officer glanced toward the stockroom, where the other two were still moving about, then back at me. No, he said. Didn't smell it on him. Drugs? He hesitated. Doesn't look like it, he said finally. But we'll know more after. That answer didn't help. In a strange way, it made things worse. Because if he wasn't drunk, and he wasn't high, then what I'd just seen, that look in his eyes, the way he moved, the way he talked to something that wasn't there, that was just him. The officer finished writing, tore the page free, and tucked it into his notebook. You did the right thing calling it in, he said. Best thing you can do in situations like this. Yeah, I said, though my voice didn't quite match the word. He studied me for a second, like he could tell I wasn't convinced. You all right to finish your shift? He asked. I looked around the shop, at the knocked-over display stand, at the damp footprints still smudged across the entrance tiles, at the corridor leading to the stockroom, the door now hanging slightly off its hinges. I thought about saying no, about asking if I could just lock up and leave, but then the practical side of my brain kicked in, the same part that had taken this job in the first place. Rent, bills, the fact that walking out in the middle of a shift wouldn't exactly go down well with management. Yeah, I said after a moment. I'll be all right. He nodded, as if that was the answer he expected. If anything else happens, you call straight away, he said. Don't wait. I won't. With that, he left. The automatic door slid open and shut one last time, and then I was alone again. Properly alone. I stood there for a while without moving. The adrenaline had started to wear off, leaving behind this hollow, shaky feeling in my chest. My hands still weren't steady, so I shoved them into my pockets just to stop myself noticing it. Right? I muttered. I bent down and started picking up the packets of crisps the man had knocked over earlier. It felt like the most normal thing I could do. Put things back. Reset the space. Pretend the last 20 minutes hadn't happened. But it didn't work. Because now every little detail meant something. The way the door creaked slightly when I pushed it closed again. The faint dent in the metal frame where he'd hit it. The scuff marks on the floor where the officers had struggled with him. Even the silence felt different. Not empty anymore. Occupied. I went back behind the counter and sat down heavily in the chair, staring at the CCTV monitor again without really focusing on any one screen. Forecourt empty, entrance clear, aisles still. Rear door now slightly ajar where it had been forced. I leaned forward and tapped the screen, switching between feeds more quickly than before. Front, side, back, over and over. I told myself I was just being cautious. But the truth was I didn't trust the place anymore. Didn't trust what I could see, or what I couldn't. That thought stuck with me more than anything else. Because when I tried to make sense of what had happened, it didn't line up properly. The man outside had been careful, deliberate, testing doors, watching. But the man who ran in, he wasn't careful at all. He'd been frantic, disconnected, like he wasn't following a plan, just reacting to something in his head. It didn't fit. I sat there, going over it again and again. 2 different behaviors, 2 different intentions, but the same person. At least, that's what I told myself. Because the alternative, that there might have been more than one person out there, that didn't make things any easier to think about. I rubbed my face with both hands, trying to clear the fog building in my head. Get a grip, I said quietly. It's done. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. The rest of the shift dragged. Every passing minute felt longer than the last. I didn't get a single customer after the police left. Not one. The road stayed empty, the rain coming and going in waves, the whole place sitting in that strange, heavy stillness that made it feel cut off from everything else. At one point, I made myself a coffee just to have something to do. I stood by the machine, watching the dark liquid drip slowly into the cup, listening to the low gurgle of the boiler. It should have been comforting, routine, familiar, but all I could think about was the way the man had stood in that stockroom corner, whispering to himself like nothing around him existed. Like the room I was standing in now wasn't the room he was in at all. I shook the thought off and took the cup back to the counter. As I passed the front windows, I glanced out automatically. And that was when I noticed something I hadn't seen earlier. The payphone. It was still there, of course, standing just beyond the edge of the forecourt lights. But now the receiver wasn't hanging loose anymore. It was back in place, perfectly still. I slowed my steps without meaning to. I was sure, absolutely sure that earlier it had been swinging. Not much, just enough to catch the light. I set the coffee down and stepped closer to the glass, narrowing my eyes slightly as I looked out into the dark. The phone box didn't move. Nothing did. Wind, I said again, though this time the words sounded thinner. I stayed there for a few seconds longer, then forced myself to turn away. Back to the counter, back to the screens, back to the quiet. But something had shifted in my head by then. Before, I'd been reacting to what was happening. Now I was waiting for it to happen again. And the worst part was, I didn't know what it was anymore. I didn't sleep the next day. I tried. I really did. I went home just after 6, same as always, made a bit of toast I didn't eat, and lay down with the curtains drawn. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw him again, standing at the counter, then turning, then running, like he just realized something was behind him. Or worse, like something had been there the whole time. I kept replaying it in my head, trying to slow it down, pick it apart. The way he'd looked past me, the way he'd said, "don't like," he was answering something. And the more I thought about it, the less it felt like I'd been the center of what happened. More like I'd been in the way. At some point, I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember was jolting awake to the sound of my phone vibrating on the bedside table. My heart was already racing before I even picked it up, like my body had decided ahead of me that whatever was calling wasn't good. It was the station. I nearly didn't answer, but I did. "Yeah?" I said, voice still thick with sleep I hadn't properly had. "Callum, it's Pete." Pete was the manager, late 40s, permanently tired, the sort of bloke who always sounded like he'd just been dragged into a conversation he didn't want. "You all right?" he asked. "Yeah," I said automatically. Just woke up." "Right. Listen, I heard about last night. Police came by earlier." That woke me up properly. "What'd they say?" "Not much," he replied. "Just wanted to check the cameras, ask a few questions. Standard stuff." There was a pause. "Look," he went on, "I know it was a bit intense. If you want tonight off, I can try and sort something." I almost said yes. It was right there, the easy way out. But then something stupid kicked in again. Pride, maybe. Or the fact I didn't want to feel like I couldn't handle a job I'd barely been in a month. "I'm fine," I said. "I'll come in." "You sure?" "Yeah." Another pause. "All right then," Pete said. "But if anything like that happens again, you call it in straight away." "Yeah? Don't mess about." "I won't." We hung up. I stared at the ceiling for a while after that, listening to the quiet of the flat, the occasional car passing outside, the distant sound of someone moving around upstairs. Normal daytime noise. Ordinary. Safe. It didn't feel like it had anything to do with the place I'd be going back to in a few hours. I got up eventually, had a shower, tried to shake the heaviness in my head. It didn't shift. Not properly. It just dulled enough that I could pretend I was all right. By the time I got to the station that night, the sky had already gone dark again. Marden Cross looked the same as ever from the road. Lights on, forecourt empty, that familiar, isolated glow in the middle of nowhere. If you didn't know what had happened the night before, you'd never think twice about it. Even pulling into the staff spot at the side, I had this moment where I thought, maybe it was just a one-off. But then I got out of the car, and I could smell it. Not strong, just faint, but it was there. Something sharp. Petrol. I stood still for a second, looking around. The pumps were quiet. No spills that I could see. The ground was wet again from earlier rain, reflecting the canopy lights back up in that dull, oily sheen. Probably nothing, I muttered. I locked the car and headed inside. The shop door opened with that same soft sigh, and for a split second I hesitated on the threshold. It felt stupid, but I couldn't help it, because the place didn't feel empty anymore. Not in the way it used to. It felt like it was waiting. I shook it off and stepped in, forcing myself to move normally. Pete was behind the counter, counting the till. "All right?" he said, barely looking up. "Yeah," I replied. "You?" "Living the dream," he muttered. "Same as always." For a few minutes, everything was normal. Shift handover, quick rundown, nothing unusual. The CCTV had been checked. No damage beyond the stockroom door. Police might come back for more footage. Standard stuff. "You'll be fine," Pete said as he grabbed his coat. "Last night was just bad luck." "Yeah," I said, though something in me resisted the idea. Bad luck felt too simple. He left a minute later, the doors sliding shut behind him, and just like that, I was alone again. I stood there, listening to the silence settle back in. Same hum, same lights, same empty forecourt. I moved behind the counter and pulled the CCTV monitor closer, almost without thinking. The feeds flickered slightly as they switched, front, side, back, all clear. I let out a slow breath. "See?" I said quietly to myself, nothing to it. For a while it held. An hour passed, then another. A couple of customers came through, nothing unusual. A bloke in a high-vis jacket grabbing a sandwich. A girl on her phone buying cigarettes without looking up once. Normal people, normal interactions. It helped. It grounded me again. By half one, I'd almost convinced myself the whole thing had been exactly what Pete said. Bad luck, a one-off. Something that wouldn't happen again. But then everything seemed fine, like nothing would happen. And that was when I saw the headlights. They came slowly around the bend in the road, cutting through the dark, reflecting off the wet surface as they approached the forecourt. Not fast, not slow either, just deliberate. I watched them without thinking much of it at first. Another customer, that's all. The car pulled in and stopped beside Pump 3. It was an older silver estate, engine still running. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, dark waterproof jacket pulled tight around him. He didn't look at the shop straight away. Instead, he walked to the back of the car and opened the boot. I felt something in my chest tighten slightly. He reached inside and pulled out a plastic petrol can. Then another. Then another. I leaned forward, watching more closely now. He set them down one by one beside the pump, lining them up neatly on the wet concrete. 4, 5, 6. He didn't rush, didn't hesitate, just kept going. By the time he finished, there were at least a dozen of them sitting there. All empty, all waiting. I swallowed. "All right," I muttered. He picked up the nozzle and started filling them. One after the other, petrol splashing, the smell growing stronger, sharper, pushing through the glass even from where I stood. He didn't look around, didn't check his phone, didn't do anything except fill each can carefully, then move on to the next. There was something about the way he did it that didn't sit right. Too focused, too calm, like he knew exactly how long it would take, like he'd done it before. When he finished, he placed the nozzle back slowly and stood there for a moment, staring at the row of filled cans at his feet. Not counting, not checking, just looking. Then, after what felt like too long, he turned his head and looked straight at the shop. At me, even through the glass, I could feel it, that look. Flat, unrateable, like he was deciding something. I forced myself not to look away, tried to act like it was normal, like I wasn't already thinking about how much petrol was sitting out there and what someone might do with it. After a few seconds, he turned and walked toward the entrance. The automatic door slid open. Cold air and the smell of fuel rushed in with him. Up close, he looked older than I thought. Late 30s, maybe. Hard face. Tired, but not in the same way as the man from before. This was different, controlled. He walked straight to the counter, didn't browse, didn't hesitate, just reached into his jacket pocket and pulled something out, a small box. He placed it down in front of me. Matches. My stomach dropped. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled. "What?" he said lightly. "You think I'm gonna burn something down?" He held my gaze as he said it. And something about the way he said it, it wasn't a joke. Not really. Not in the way normal people joke. I felt my throat go dry. I honestly didn't know what to say, because suddenly everything from the night before came rushing back at once. The man, the running, the whispering, the feeling that something bigger was happening just out of sight. And now this man, these cans, these matches, standing right in front of me like it was nothing, like it was just another normal transaction. I picked up the box slowly, turned it over in my hand, then looked back at him. "I'm not sure I can sell you these," I said. There was a flicker in his expression, small but there, and just like that, I knew, whatever this was, it wasn't over, not even close. For a second, he didn't react at all. He just stood there, looking at me across the counter, like he hadn't quite processed what I'd said. The smile stayed on his face, but it didn't move, didn't shift. It just sat there, stretched thin in a way that made it feel less like an expression and more like something he put on. "I'm not sure I can sell you these," I repeated, a bit firmer this time, though I could hear the tension in my own voice. Still nothing. Then he let out a small breath through his nose and leaned back slightly, tilting his head like he was trying to see me from a different angle. "Right," he said. "And why's that?" His tone was calm, too calm. I glanced past him toward the forecourt, where the row of filled petrol cans sat under the lights, glistening faintly from the rain. "That's a lot of fuel," I said carefully. "And, I don't know, just doesn't sit right, that's all." The smile faded then, not dramatically, just gone. He looked at me properly after that. Not casually, not distracted, directly. And I felt it again, that same uncomfortable weight in my chest I'd had the night before, like I'd just stepped into something without meaning to. "You don't know me," he said. "No," I replied, "I don't." "So what exactly doesn't sit right?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again, because there wasn't a good answer to that, not one that didn't sound ridiculous. "I just can't sell them," I said finally. There was a pause, long enough that I started to wonder if I'd pushed it too far. Then suddenly he laughed. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't natural either. It came out too quickly, cut off halfway through, like he decided to stop himself mid-reaction. "Fair enough," he's raising both hands slightly in mock surrender. "Your shop, your rules." Relief hit me so fast I nearly didn't trust it. "Yeah," I said, nodding. "Exactly." For a moment I thought that was it, that he'd just walk out, maybe mutter something under his breath, get in his car and leave. But he didn't move straight away. Instead, he leaned forward again, just slightly, resting his fingertips on the counter. "You ever get bored out here?" he asked. The question caught me off guard. "What?" "Working nights, middle of nowhere, no one around." He glanced toward the windows. "Must get quiet." "Sometimes," I said cautiously. "Yeah," he murmured. "Too quiet, I'd imagine." Something in his tone made that last part land wrong. Not like he was making conversation, more like he was stating a fact. I didn't reply. He studied me for another second, then pushed himself upright and stepped back. "All right then," he said. "I'll leave you to it." He turned and walked toward the door. I watched him the whole way. The automatic doors opened, cold air rushed in again, and just before he stepped out, he paused, half turned his head. "You did the right thing," he said. Then he left. I stood there, staring after him, trying to figure out what that meant. Outside, he moved straight to the row of petrol cans, crouching down to lift them one by one and load them back into the boot of the car. He didn't rush, didn't look around, just worked steadily, like he had all the time in the world. I glanced at the CCTV monitor instinctively, checking the other angles. Everything else was still empty. Front, side, back, clear. When I looked up again, he was closing the boot. He got into the driver's seat, sat there for a moment with the engine idling, then finally pulled away, the headlights sweeping across the forecourt before disappearing back onto Blackmere Road. Just like that. Gone. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and leaned back against the counter. "All right," I muttered. "That's done." But the words didn't stick, because something about that interaction didn't feel finished. It felt paused, like whatever decision he'd been making when he looked at me through the glass, he hadn't fully made it yet. I shook my head, trying to push the thought away. "Overthinking," I said quietly. "That's all it is." I forced myself to move, to get back into routine. Wiped the counter, checked the shelves, refilled the coffee machine, anything to keep my mind occupied. For a while, it worked. Time moved on. The tension eased just slightly. No more cars came in. No more strange noises. The station slipped back into that familiar, heavy quiet that I'd almost started to accept. But it didn't last, because about 40 minutes later, I saw headlights again, same direction, same slow approach. My stomach dropped before I even saw the car properly. "Don't," I said under my breath, but it was already pulling in. The same silver estate, same engine hum, same deliberate stop by pump 3. He didn't get out straight away this time, just sat there, watching the shop, watching me. Even through the glass, I could feel it, that same unreadable stare. "What are you doing?" I muttered. I glanced at the CCTV again, checking the other angles. Nothing, no other cars, no movement, just him. After what felt like a full minute, the driver's door opened. He stepped out. No petrol cans this time, no rush either, just a slow, measured walk toward the entrance. I felt my pulse pick up again. This was different. The first time, there had been a reason for him to come in. Now, there wasn't. The doors slid open. He stepped inside, and the smell hit again. Petrol, stronger this time, clinging to him. "So," he said casually, like we were picking up a conversation we'd never finished. "Still not selling?" I didn't answer straight away, because something else had caught my attention. His hands, they were wet, not just damp from the rain, glossy. And the way the light caught them, it wasn't just water. A thin, oily sheen ran across his skin. My chest tightened. "You've already filled the cans," I said slowly. "You don't need anything else." He smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes at all. "No," he said, "not for that." He took another step closer to the counter, and for the first time since he'd walked in, I felt it properly. Not just unease, not just tension, fear, real, immediate fear. Because whatever he'd been deciding before, he'd made up his mind. "You ever think about how easy it is?" he said quietly. My throat went dry. "Easy to what?" He tilted his head slightly, like the answer should have been obvious. "To make a point," he said. The silence that followed felt heavy, pressing. I could hear my own breathing now, too loud, too fast. I forced myself to stay where I was, not to step back, not to show it. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "If you're not buying anything, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." He stared at me. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then, very slowly, he laughed again, softer this time, almost disappointed. "Yeah," he said, "that's about what I thought." He reached into his pocket. My heart jumped, but he didn't pull out anything dangerous, just his keys. He held them loosely in his hand, then gave a small shrug. "All right," he said, "I'll go." He turned, walked toward the door, and just before stepping out, he looked back at me one last time. "You might want to keep an eye on the road tonight," he said. Then he left. The doors slid shut behind him, and I stood there, frozen in place, trying to process what had just happened. Outside, his car idled for a few seconds longer. Then it drove off again, back into the dark. I stared at the empty forecourt, my mind racing now. That wasn't normal. None of it was. The cans, the matches, the way he'd come back, the way he'd looked at me, the things he'd said. "You did the right thing." Too quiet. Easy to make a point. I swallowed hard. And then, without thinking, I reached for the phone, because whatever this was, it was getting worse. My hand hovered over the phone for a second before I actually picked it up. That hesitation shouldn't have been there. After everything that had already happened, it should have been automatic. Call it in, let someone else deal with it. That's what you're supposed to do. But there was this voice in the back of my head telling me I didn't have anything solid. Just a feeling. A strange bloke with petrol and a bad attitude. And then another voice, louder this time, cut through it. "You might want to keep an eye on the road tonight." I grabbed the phone. This time I didn't hesitate. "Yeah, sorry. It's Martin Cross again. I called last night about the man. There's another one now. Silver Estate. Same reg as before. He's just left. He's got a lot of petrol in the back of the car. And he said some things that don't sit right." I forced myself to slow down, to give details properly. The operator asked the usual questions. Direction of travel, description, anything else unusual. "Smells like petrol," I added, glancing toward the doors. "Like he's covered in it." There was a pause on the line. "We'll pass that on," the operator said. "Officers are in the area. Stay inside and keep the doors secure if you can." "I will." The call ended. I set the phone down more carefully than I meant to, like it might go off again if I didn't. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at nothing. Then I moved. I walked to the front and hit the override switch behind the counter, locking the automatic doors in place. The soft hum as they sealed shut sounded louder than usual, final somehow. Right? I muttered. I checked the CCTV again. Front, empty. Side, nothing. Back, clear. I told myself that was it. I'd done what I could. He was gone, and now it was someone else's problem. But the words didn't land properly, because the more I thought about him, the less it felt like he'd left. It felt like he'd gone to do something, and that thought stuck. It settled in my chest and refused to shift. The next 20 minutes dragged. I didn't sit this time. I stayed on my feet, pacing slowly between the counter and the front windows, glancing out at the road every few seconds like I was expecting to see headlights come flying back around the bend. Nothing came. Just the same empty stretch of wet tarmac reflecting the station lights back at me. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No updates. Come on, I muttered under my breath. Another 10 minutes passed. Still nothing. And then headlights. Not from the direction he'd gone. From the opposite side. I straightened immediately, watching as a police car pulled into the forecourt, blue lights flashing once before switching off. It rolled to a stop near Pump 2, engine idling. Relief hit me harder than I expected. Finally, I breathed. The driver's door opened, and an officer stepped out, different from the ones the night before. Younger, more alert. He walked quickly toward the shop, glancing around the forecourt as he did. I unlocked the doors and let him in. "You the one who called?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "He's just gone, Silver Estate, heading toward the village." The officer nodded, already reaching for his radio. "Control, I've got the caller. Confirming direction of travel." He relayed the details while I stood there, watching him, waiting for something, anything, that would make this feel under control again. When he finished, he looked back at me. "All right," he said. "Tell me exactly what happened." So I did. From the first time the man came in, to the petrol cans, to the matches, to the way he'd come back and what he'd said. I didn't leave anything out. The officer listened, nodding occasionally, his expression tightening slightly as I got to the part about the petrol on the man's hands. "You said he smelled strongly of fuel?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Like he'd been handling it, or worse." "And he mentioned making a point?" I nodded. The officer exhaled slowly, then glanced back toward his car. "Right," he said. "We'll get units out looking for him." There was a brief pause. Then I said it. "Do you think he's going to do something?" The officer didn't answer straight away, which was answer enough. "We're taking it seriously," he said finally, and then "That's all I can say right now." He stepped outside again to speak into his radio, his voice low but urgent this time. I watched him through the glass, watched the way he kept scanning the road while he spoke, watched the way his posture had shifted. Less casual now, more focused. It made something in my stomach drop. Because if he was taking it seriously, then this wasn't just in my head. After a minute, he came back in. "All right," he said. "We've got a few units checking the surrounding roads. If he's still nearby, we'll find him." "If," I repeated quietly. He didn't respond to that. Instead, he looked around the shop briefly, his gaze lingering on the CCTV monitor. "You working alone tonight?" "Yeah." He gave a small nod. "Keep the doors locked for now," he said. "If anything else happens, you call straight away." "I will." He hesitated for a second, like he was about to say something else, then stopped himself. "All right," he said. "We'll be in touch." And just like that, he was gone again. The police car pulled away, headlights sweeping across the forecourt before disappearing into the dark. I locked the doors again. The hum of the building settled back in. And once more, I was alone. But this time it felt different. Because now I knew, whatever that man was planning, it wasn't random, it wasn't harmless. And somewhere out there, beyond the edge of those lights, it was already in motion. I went back behind the counter and sat down slowly, my eyes fixed on the CCTV screen again. Front, side, back, all clear. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was looking at it the wrong way, that the real danger wasn't something trying to get in anymore. It was something that had already passed through and was heading somewhere else. I rubbed my face with both hands, trying to steady myself. "Just wait," I muttered. "They'll find him." But even as I said it, another thought crept in, uninvited, uncomfortable. What if they don't? I swallowed hard, because suddenly, This didn't feel like something that would end neatly. It felt like something that had already slipped past the point where it could be stopped. And all I could do now was sit there and wait to find out where it landed. They didn't find him. Not that night. I stayed on shift until 6 in the morning, checking the road every few minutes like it might suddenly give something back. Police cars passed twice, once heading toward the village, once coming back, but neither stopped again. No updates, no calls, nothing. By the time the sky started to lighten, that dull gray you get before sunrise, it felt like the whole thing had just slipped through everyone's fingers. Pete came in just after I locked the doors for the morning. "You look rough," he said, setting his coffee down behind the counter. "Did they find him?" I asked straight away. He shook his head. "Not that I've heard." That was it. No urgency in his voice. No real concern either. Just the same tired acceptance he had for everything. "Probably turned out to be nothing," he added, almost as an afterthought. I stared at him. "Nothing?" I repeated. He shrugged. "People say weird things, now especially late at night. You get all sorts coming through here." I wanted to argue, to explain it properly. The cans, the petrol, the way he looked at me, the way he came back. But something about Pete's tone stopped me, because I could already tell he decided what it was, and it didn't match what I'd seen. "Yeah," I said finally. "Maybe." I grabbed my coat and left before I could say anything else. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I sat in my car for a while at the edge of the forecourt, engine off, watching the place from the outside. It looked different in daylight, less threatening. Just a small, slightly run-down petrol station by the side of a quiet road. The kind of place you wouldn't think twice about stopping at. It made it easier to doubt yourself, to think maybe you'd built it up into something bigger than it was. But then I remembered the smell of petrol on his hands, the way he'd said, "easy to make a point," and that doubt didn't last. I drove home after that, but the feeling followed me. Same as before, I tried to sleep. Same as before, it didn't come easy. Every time I drifted off, I'd wake again a few minutes later, heart already racing, like I'd missed something important. By mid-afternoon, I gave up. Made a cup of tea I didn't drink. Sat in silence, staring at my phone, waiting for it to ring. It didn't. I went back in that night anyway. I don't know why. Part of me thought maybe I'd hear something, an update. A call from the police saying they'd found him, that it was over, that I could stop thinking about it. But when I pulled into Martin Cross again, everything looked exactly the same as it had the day before. Same lights, same empty forecourt, same stretch of road disappearing into the dark, and no sign that anything had changed. Pete was already there, finishing up his shift. Still nothing. He said before I could even ask, "If they find him, they'll let us know." "Yeah," I replied. He grabbed his things and left, same as always. And just like that, I was alone again. I stood there for a moment listening. The hum of the fridges, the buzz of the lights, the faint ticking sound from the cooling coffee machine, all normal, all exactly the same. But it didn't feel the same, because now I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was waiting. That was the difference. Before, things happened and I dealt with them. Now I was expecting something to happen, and that made every second stretch, every sound sharper, every shadow heavier. The first hour passed slowly. No customers, no cars, just the steady rhythm of nothing. I kept moving, just to keep myself grounded, checking stock, wiping surfaces, adjusting things that didn't need adjusting. But my attention kept drifting back to the same place, the road. I found myself standing by the front window more than once, staring out into the dark, trying to see further than the lights allowed. There's a point where the forecourt ends and the darkness just takes over. You can't see past it, not properly, and the longer you look at it, the more it feels like something could be standing just beyond that line, watching, waiting. I shook the thought off every time it came, told myself it was just my head. That's all it was. But it didn't stop. Around 1:30, I saw something. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, a shift in the shadows near the hedgerow at the far edge of the forecourt. I leaned forward slightly, narrowing my eyes. Nothing moved. "Right," I muttered. "Leave it." I turned away, but then, a few seconds later, I looked back. And there it was again, not movement exactly, more like a shape where there shouldn't be one, something darker than the dark around it, standing just outside the reach of the lights. My chest tightened. "Hello?" I called out, though I knew it wouldn't reach that far. No response. I watched it for a full minute, maybe longer. It didn't come closer, didn't move away either. Just stayed there. At that point, I told myself it had to be something normal. A post, a bin, something I hadn't noticed before. Because if it wasn't, then I didn't have a good explanation. I stepped away from the window, forced myself to stop looking, went back behind the counter, but the feeling didn't leave. It stayed with me, that quiet awareness, like there was something just outside the edge of what I could see, and it hadn't gone anywhere. About 10 minutes later, the payphone rang. I froze. The sound cut through the silence so sharply it felt unreal. That old metallic ringing, loud enough to carry across the forecourt and through the glass. It shouldn't have been working. No one used it. Half the time it didn't even register coins properly. But there it was, ringing. Once, twice, 3 times. I stared at it through the window, my body refusing to move. "No," I muttered. "No, don't." It kept ringing, steady, relentless, like it wasn't going to stop. I swallowed hard. Then, against every bit of sense I had, I stepped out from behind the counter, walked slowly toward the door, unlocked it, and pushed it open. Cold air rushed in again, carrying that faint, sharp smell with it. Petrol, still there, still lingering. The ringing didn't stop. I stepped out onto the forecourt, each footstep louder than it should have been. The sound of it echoed in my head, too exposed, too open. I didn't like it. I didn't like being out there at all, but I kept going toward the payphone. It stood there, just as I'd seen it earlier, still, except for the receiver, which was swinging slightly now, back and forth, as if someone had just let go of it. The ringing stopped the moment I got close. Silence dropped in hard. I stood there, staring at it. Then, slowly, I reached out, picked up the receiver, held it to my ear. For a second, nothing, just a faint hiss. Then a voice, low, breathing, right on the line. He's still deciding. My blood ran cold. "Who is this?" I said immediately. "What are you talking about?" No answer, just that breathing. Then a quiet click. The line went dead. I stood there for a second longer, the receiver still pressed to my ear, my heart pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. Then I lowered it slowly, set it back in place, and turned. The forecourt lights buzzed faintly overhead. The shop glowed behind me, and beyond that, the road, dark, empty, but no longer quiet, because now I knew, whatever this was, it hadn't passed. It was building. I went back inside slower than I'd gone out. I didn't run. I didn't rush the door, but every step felt wrong, like I'd left something behind on that forecourt that hadn't come back in with me. The kind of feeling you get when you walk past someone in the dark and you just know they turn to watch you. The automatic doors shut with a soft click behind me, sealing the warmth back in, but it didn't feel like protection anymore. It felt like I just closed myself in. I locked them straight away. No hesitation this time. The small red light blinked on above the override switch, and I stood there for a second, staring at it, as if that tiny thing could actually keep anything out. "Right," I muttered, though my voice had gone tight. "That's enough." I went back behind the counter and grabbed the phone again, my hands still slightly unsteady. The line rang longer this time. When the operator answered, I spoke before she could finish her greeting. "I've just had another one," I said. "Same location. The payphone outside, it rang. There was someone on the line." There was a pause. "Can you repeat that?" she asked. "The payphone," I said, glancing toward the window like I expected it to start moving again. "The one on the forecourt. It rang. I answered it. Someone spoke to me." "What did they say?" I hesitated, because saying it out loud made it sound worse. "He said, he's still deciding." Another pause. "Is there anyone on the premises with you now?" she asked. "No." "Any vehicles?" "No." "All right, stay inside. We'll log this and have someone come back out." "Yeah," I said quietly. "Thanks." The call ended. I set the phone down and leaned both hands on the counter, staring at the surface without really seeing it. He's still deciding. The words didn't sit right. Not just because they were strange, because they felt connected. To him. To the man with the petrol. To the way he'd stood there, looking at me like he was weighing something up. I swallowed hard. "What are you deciding?" I muttered under my breath. But I already had a bad feeling I knew the answer. Time slowed after that. Not in a dramatic way. Just stretched. Every minute felt longer than it should have. Every sound felt closer. The hum of the fridges seemed louder again, the ticking of the coffee machine sharper. Even my own breathing felt like it was echoing in the room. I kept checking the cameras, over and over. Front, side, back, nothing. No movement, no shapes at the edge of the light this time. Just the empty forecourt, wet and still. But the feeling didn't go. If anything, it got worse. Because now I wasn't just watching for something to appear. I was waiting for something I couldn't predict. And that's a different kind of fear. It must have been around 2:15 when I saw the headlights again. Same direction as before, same slow, deliberate approach. My chest tightened instantly. "No," I said under my breath. "Don't come back." But it did. The silver estate rolled into the forecourt like it had every right to be there. Same engine hummed. Same controlled stop beside pump 3. For a second, I just stood there, staring at it, trying to convince myself it might be someone else. Another car that just happened to look similar. But deep down, I already knew. The driver's door opened, and he stepped out. Same jacket, same posture, same calm, measured movements. Except this time, he didn't go to the pump straight away. He stood there for a moment, looking toward the shop, toward me. Even through the glass, I could feel that look settle on me again. Flat, unreadable, like he was checking something, confirming something. Then he turned, walked to the back of the car, opened the boot, and started unloading the petrol cans again. One by one, setting them down in the exact same way as before. Neat, ordered, precise. I felt my stomach drop. "Why are you back?" I whispered. He didn't rush, didn't look around, just carried on like it was part of a routine, like this was normal. By the time he finished, there were even more cans than before. Or maybe it just felt like more. They lined the forecourt in a rough arc, glistening under the lights, rainwater beating on their surfaces. He picked up the nozzle, started filling them. Again, petrol splashed. The smell pushed stronger against the glass. Sharp, heavy, wrong. I found myself stepping back without meaning to. Because suddenly the whole forecourt didn't look like a place for cars anymore. It looked like something else, something waiting. When he finished, he didn't move straight away, just like before. He stood there, looking at the cans. But this time, he didn't seem calm. Not completely. There was something else there now, something tighter. Like whatever decision he'd been making earlier, he was closer to it. My chest felt tight, my throat dry. I glanced at the phone again, thought about calling it in straight away. But something stopped me. Not logic, not fear of being wrong, just a feeling that I needed to see what he'd do next. That whatever this was, this moment mattered. He turned, looked straight at the shop again, and started walking toward it, slowly. No rush this time, just a steady, deliberate pace, like he wasn't testing anything anymore, like he already knew how it would go. The automatic doors didn't open, still locked. He stopped just outside them, close enough that I could see his face clearly now. Water ran down from his hairline, mixing with the sheen on his skin. His eyes met mine, and for a second, neither of us moved. Then, very slowly, he smiled. Not wide, not exaggerated, just enough, and raised his hand, tapped once on the glass. A soft, hollow sound. "Open it," he said. I didn't move. Didn't even realize I'd shaken my head until after I'd done it. No, his smile didn't fade. If anything, it deepened slightly. "Come on," he said. "We've already had this conversation." I swallowed hard. "You need to leave." There was a pause. Then he let out a small breath, fogging the glass between us. "Still deciding, are you?" he said quietly. The words hit me like a punch. My chest tightened instantly. "Who called you?" I demanded before I could stop myself. His expression shifted. Just slightly. Confusion, or maybe surprise. "Called me?" he repeated. I didn't answer, because suddenly I wasn't sure. Had the voice on the phone been talking about him? Or had it been talking about me? That thought hit harder than anything else, because if it was me, then what exactly was I deciding? I didn't get time to figure it out, because outside he moved, not away from the door, not back to the car, but sideways, stepping out of my direct line of sight. I leaned slightly, trying to keep him in view. "What are you doing?" I said, sharper now. No answer, just movement. Then a sound, a dull plastic scrape against wet concrete. I froze, because I knew exactly what that was. I moved quickly to the side window, looked out, and saw him, dragging one of the petrol cans, closer to the building. My heart started pounding instantly. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice louder than I meant it to. "You need to stop right now!" He didn't. He set the can down near the base of the wall. then reached for another, slow, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. And that's when it hit me, properly, fully, cold and clear. He wasn't bluffing. He wasn't testing me. He wasn't waiting anymore. He'd made his decision. And whatever he was about to do, I was already part of it. Stop! I don't think I'd ever shouted like that before. Not properly. It came out sharp and loud, echoing off the glass and metal around me, but it didn't carry any authority. It sounded like panic, like exactly what it was. Outside, he didn't even flinch. He just kept moving. Another can dragged across the wet concrete, the plastic scraping in a slow, deliberate rhythm that made my skin crawl. He set it down beside the first one, adjusting it slightly with his foot so they sat neatly against the wall, like he was arranging something, like it mattered where they went. Oi! I shouted again, moving along the inside of the window to keep him in sight. I've called the police. You need to leave. That got a reaction. Not much. Just a small tilt of his head. Then he looked up at me through the glass and smiled. You already did, he said calmly. Didn't help, did it? My stomach dropped. You need to stop, I said, my voice tighter now, my throat dry. This is criminal damage at least. You'll get done for this. He let out a soft breath, almost like a laugh. Damage? He repeated. Is that what you think this is? He reached for another can. I felt something shift in my chest then. Not just fear, something else. That point where your brain stops trying to reason with the situation and just reacts. I turned and ran back behind the counter, grabbing the phone again, my fingers slipping slightly as I dialed. Emergency. Which service? Police, I said immediately. Same location as before. He's back. He's pouring petrol. He's putting it against the building. Stay on the line, the operator said quickly. Are you in immediate danger? Yes, I snapped. Yes, I am. I stopped mid-sentence. Because outside, he wasn't dragging another can anymore. He picked one up and was tipping it. A thin stream of petrol poured out onto the concrete, spreading quickly in the shallow dips and cracks, reflecting the overhead lights in a shifting, oily pattern. My chest tightened so hard it felt like it locked. He's pouring it now, I said, my voice dropping, the panic cutting through properly. He's actually doing it. Units are on their way, the operator said. Stay inside. Keep your distance from the doors and windows if possible. Distance. Right. Like that would matter if he set the place alight. I stepped back instinctively anyway, putting the counter between me and the front of the shop, even though I knew it wasn't real protection. Outside, he finished pouring the first can, then set it down, picked up another. Same slow, steady movement. Like he wasn't in a hurry. Like he had time. Too much time. Why are you doing this? I shouted, my voice cracking slightly despite myself. This time, he answered, without looking up. Because someone has to, he said. The words didn't make sense. Or maybe they did, in a way I didn't want to think about. Stop, I said again, more desperate now. Just stop, all right? Whatever's going on, you don't have to do this. He paused then. For the first time since he'd started, the can still tilted slightly in his hand, petrol dripping steadily onto the ground. Then he straightened slowly, set the can down, and looked at me again. Really looked this time. No smile, no mockery, just that same flat, heavy stare. You don't understand, he said. I swallowed hard. Then explain it, I shot back, the words coming out faster now, driven by something between fear and frustration. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're about to burn this place down. A beat of silence. Then, that depends, he said quietly. On what? He held my gaze for a second longer, then glanced past me. Not at the counter, not at the shelves, at something further back in the shop. My chest tightened again. What? I said, my voice dropping. What are you looking at? He didn't answer straight away, just kept his eyes fixed on that spot behind me. Then, very slowly, he spoke, on whether you're going to let her walk out again. The words hit me like a jolt. What? My mind scrambled, trying to catch up. Who? I said, turning slightly despite myself, glancing over my shoulder into the shop. Nothing there, just empty aisles, silent shelves. I turned back to him. There's no one here, I said more sharply now. He didn't react, just kept watching that same spot. Yes, he said, there is. My stomach dropped, because the way he said it, there was no hesitation, no doubt, just certainty. That's not funny, I said, though my voice had lost its edge. He didn't smile. I'm not joking. I felt a cold wave move through me. Who are you talking about? I asked. He shifted slightly, stepping closer to the glass. Close enough now that I could see every detail of his face, the lines, the tension, the exhaustion. She came through here earlier, he said. Red car, nervous, wouldn't stay still. Leanne, the thought hit instantly, uninvited, unwanted, but it fit too well. She's gone, I said quickly. She left hours ago. His eyes flicked back to mine. No, he said. The word was quiet, certain. She didn't. The silence that followed pressed in hard, because suddenly, this wasn't just about him anymore, or the petrol, or the matches. It was something else, something that had been building since before he even arrived. Look, I said, trying to steady my voice again. I don't know what you think you saw, but there's no one else here. You need to leave before you make this worse for yourself. He stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled again, but this time, it wasn't calm. It wasn't controlled. There was something broken in it, something off. You're still doing it, he said. Doing what? Pretending. The word landed heavy. Before I could respond, he bent down, grabbed another can, and this time he didn't pour it onto the ground. He lifted it higher and threw it. The container slammed against the glass with a heavy, hollow crack, petrol splashing outward in a wide, uneven spray. I flinched back instinctively, my heart jumping into my throat. Stop! I shouted, but the word barely felt like enough anymore. Outside, he stood there, breathing harder now. Eyes locked on me. You've got one more chance, he said. The tone had changed completely. No calm, no patience, just something raw and final. Open the door, he said, or I finish it. My pulse hammered in my ears. My hands shook at my sides, and for a split second, just one, I didn't know what the right decision was anymore. Because if I opened that door, I was letting him in. But if I didn't, I knew exactly what he was about to do. And that was when it hit me. Cold, clear, terrifying. He's still deciding, not just him, me, and whatever I chose next, there wasn't going to be a way to take it back. My hand actually moved toward the door controls. I didn't realize I was doing it at first. It was instinct, panic. That raw, desperate urge to stop what was about to happen, no matter the cost. Open the door, he said again, quieter this time. Not shouting, not threatening. And for a second, just one, I thought about it. Not in a sensible way. In that split seconds, survival kind of way where your brain stops weighing consequences and just wants the immediate danger to go away. If I let him in, he'd stop. He'd stop pouring petrol. He'd stop escalating this. That was the thought. But then something else followed it. The way he'd looked at the shop before, the way he'd said, "You're still doing it." The way his eyes kept drifting past me. Like I wasn't the real focus. My hand stopped, midair. No, I said. The word came out quieter than I meant it to. But it was enough. Something in his face changed instantly. Not anger, not rage, something worse. Disappointment. Like I just confirmed something for him. Right, he said softly, and then he turned away from the door. My stomach dropped, because I knew what that meant. Wait, I started, stepping forward instinctively. Too late. He grabbed another can, twisted the cap off, and this time, he didn't hesitate. He flung the petrol in a wide arc across the front of the building, the liquid splashing against the glass, the concrete, the metal frame of the doors. The smell hit instantly, sharp and overwhelming, pushing through the gaps in the seals. Stop! I shouted again, but it sounded distant, pointless. He dropped the empty can, reached into his pocket. My chest locked. No, don't! But he already had it. A lighter, small, silver, the kind you'd barely notice in any other situation. Now, it might as well have been a weapon. He held it up between his fingers, turning it slightly so it caught the light. Last chance, he said. My pulse hammered so hard it blurred everything else out. I took a step back, then another, because suddenly, I wasn't thinking about stopping him anymore. I was thinking about surviving this. Behind me, the shop felt smaller, the aisles closer, the walls tighter, like there was nowhere to go. And that's when something else cut through the noise. A memory. The police officer from earlier. A woman in the next village, her husband threatened to burn the house down. My breath caught. Mere Lane. That was what he'd said. That was the place. I stared at the man outside, at the petrol, at the lighter in his hand, and it clicked. You're him, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. His eyes flicked back to mine. Something in them sharpened. You're the one they're looking for, I went on, my voice steadier now despite everything. Your wife called it in. They know what you said. That hit. Not like anger, not like guilt, more like recognition. He lowered the lighter slightly, just for a second. You think that's what this is? He said quietly. What else would it be? I snapped. You filled a car with petrol and threatened to burn a house down. What do you think it looks like? He let out a slow breath, shook his head. You've got it backwards, he said. My chest tightened. Then explain it, I said, the frustration bleeding through now. Because from where I'm standing, you're about to set this place on fire. Another pause. The rain picked up again, tapping against the canopy above him. He didn't seem to notice. They'll say I lost it, he said after a moment. That I snapped. That I'm the problem. That's because you are, I shot back. This time, he did get angry. Not loud, not explosive, but it showed. A flicker, a crack in that controlled surface. You didn't see him, he said. The words came out tight, controlled, but strained. See who? I asked. He didn't answer straight away, just looked past me again, into the shop. Same place as before. My stomach dropped. Stop doing that, I said, more quietly now. There's no one there. His eyes didn't move. Yes, he said, there is. The silence stretched, heavy, pressing, and then very slowly he raised the lighter again. My chest tightened. Don't, I said. This time the word came out softer, not a command, a plea. He looked back at me, and for a moment, just a moment, he hesitated. You've got no idea what you've let walk out of here, he said. The words hit harder than anything else he'd said, because they didn't sound like a threat. They sounded like regret. What are you talking about, I asked. But even as I said it, I thought of her again, the way she looked when she came in, the questions, the fear. If a man asks whether you've seen me, say no. My throat went dry. She was here, I said slowly. Earlier, Red Minnie. His expression didn't change. She's not safe, he said. From you? I shot back. That got a reaction, a real one. His jaw tightened, his grip on the lighter shifted. You think this is about me, he said. I didn't answer, because suddenly I wasn't sure. The silence hung between us, thick, uncertain, and then sirens, faint at first, but getting closer. His head turned slightly toward the sound. My chest tightened again. They're coming, I said. He didn't respond, just stood there for a second longer, then looked back at me one last time, and something in his expression changed again. Not anger, not frustration, something else. Resignation. Too late, he said quietly, and then he flicked the lighter. The flame didn't catch. Not straight away. It sparked once. Small, sharp, that quick metallic flick, and for a split second, I thought that was it. That everything was about to go up in one sudden rush, and there'd be nothing I could do but stand there and watch it happen. But the wind shifted, just slightly. The rain came down harder at the same time, splashing across the forecourt, breaking up the thin layer of petrol that had spread across the ground. The flame wavered, unstable in his hand, struggling to hold. He stared at it, not frustrated, not panicked, just watching, like even now he was still deciding. The sirens were louder now, close, too close for him to ignore. And that was when something changed. Not outside, inside. Behind me, a sound, soft but wrong, a scrape. Like something being dragged slowly along the floor, I froze. Every instinct in my body told me not to turn around. But I did anyway, slowly, carefully. The shop looked empty, exactly as it had been seconds before. Aisles still, shelves untouched, no movement. But the sound had been real. I knew it had. Hello? I said, my voice lower now, pulled thin by everything else happening at once. No answer. Behind the glass, I could still see him, still standing there, still holding the lighter. But he wasn't looking at me anymore. His gaze had shifted, past me, same as before, tracking something I couldn't see. My chest tightened. What are you looking at? I said, sharper this time. He didn't respond, just kept staring. And then another sound, closer this time, a faint thud, from aisle 4. I turned fully now, my pulse hammering, scanning the shop properly. Nothing. Still nothing. But the air felt different, heavier, like it had been disturbed. You've got someone in there, he said quietly from outside. I shook my head instinctively, no, but the word didn't hold. Because even as I said it, I heard it again. A small, uneven step, somewhere between the shelves. My throat went dry. Leanne? I said before I could stop myself. The name felt strange in my mouth, too loud, too real, no answer. But then something shifted. At the edge of aisle 4, a shadow. Not a trick of the light this time. Something moving, low, unsteady. I took a step forward, then another, every part of me screaming not to. But I couldn't stop. "Leanne," I said again, softer now. The shadow moved again. And then she stepped into view. It was her, no doubt about it. Same clothes, same pale, drawn face. But worse, much worse. Her hair was damp, clinging to her face. One side of her cheek was bruised, deep and dark under the harsh lighting. Her eyes, that was the worst part. Wide, unfocused, like she hadn't slept in days. Or like she'd seen something she couldn't process. "Don't," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. My chest tightened instantly. "Where did you come from?" I asked. "You shouldn't have come back," she said, ignoring the question completely. Behind me, the lighter flicked again. A small, sharp sound. I didn't turn. I couldn't. "Leanne," I said, more urgently now, "you need to get out of here, now." She shook her head. "No," she said. "It's too late." The words hit hard, because they were the same tone, the same certainty. As him. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. She took a step closer, slow, unsteady. "He's not wrong," she said. My stomach dropped. "What? He's just not seeing it right," she went on, her voice trembling slightly now. "He thinks it's me." I stared at her. "That doesn't make any sense." "I know," she said. "I know it doesn't." Behind me, another flick, the lighter, closer now. The smell of petrol, stronger, more present. "Leanne," I said, my voice tightening. "We don't have time for this. You need to move, both of you. Just go. Whatever this is, sort it somewhere else." She didn't move, didn't even look toward the door. Instead, she looked past me, toward the front, toward him, and her expression changed. Not fear, not exactly, something else, something heavier. "He's not the one you should be worried about," she said quietly. My chest tightened again. "Then who is?" She didn't answer straight away, just kept looking, and then, very slowly, her eyes shifted. From him, back to me. And in that moment, something about her expression didn't feel right. It wasn't just fear anymore, or exhaustion. There was something else in it, something I couldn't place, something that made my stomach twist. "What?" I said, barely above a whisper. She took another step forward, close enough now that I could see the fine tremor in her hands, close enough that I could hear her breathing. "You didn't notice, did you?" she said. My pulse spiked. "Notice what?" She hesitated, just for a second, like she wasn't sure how to say it. Then, "You're not alone in here." The words landed hard, cold, immediate. My breath caught. "That's not funny," I said. But my voice didn't sound convinced. Her gaze didn't shift, didn't break. "I'm not joking," she said. And then, from somewhere behind me, closer than before, I heard it, a breath, not mine, not hers, something else, right at the edge of my hearing. My entire body locked up. Slowly, very slowly, I turned my head, and in the reflection of the glass, just for a second, I saw it, a shape, standing behind me, too close, too still. And then it moved. I spun around, too fast, heart slamming against my ribs so hard it felt like it might knock the breath out of me. "There's no one," I started, but the words died in my throat, because something had moved. Not clearly, not fully, but enough. A shift of space between the aisles. A presence where there shouldn't have been one. My eyes darted across the shop, trying to lock onto it, trying to make sense of what I'd seen in the reflection. "Did you see that?" I said, my voice tight, barely controlled. Leanne didn't answer straight away. I turned back to her. She was watching the same spot. Not surprised. Not confused, like she'd been expecting it. "That's what I've been trying to tell you," she said quietly. My stomach dropped. "No," I said immediately. No, there's no one else here. I've checked the cameras, Cameras don't show everything," she cut in. Her voice wasn't panicked. That was the worst part. It was calm, certain, like she'd already accepted something I was still trying to deny. Behind me, the lighter flicked again. This time I flinched, not just because of the sound, because of how close it felt, because of how thin the line was between what was happening outside and whatever this was inside. "Lean," I said, forcing myself to focus. "You need to explain what you mean, right now." She took a breath, shaky, uneven, then glanced toward the back corridor, toward the stock room, the freezer room. "They use places like this," she said. "Out of the way, quiet, no one paying attention." My chest tightened. "Who does?" She hesitated. "People who move things," she said. "People, goods, whatever they need to." That didn't help. "If you're saying someone's hiding in here, I'm saying they don't leave," she said. The words hit harder than they should have. "What does that mean?" She didn't answer straight away. Instead, she took a slow step backward, toward the corridor. toward the back. My pulse spiked. "Where are you going?" I asked. Her eyes flicked to mine. "Where he went," she said. The memory hit instantly. The man from the night before. The way he'd run straight to the back. The way the officers had found him, standing in the corner, whispering. My chest tightened again. "No," I said. "No, we're not going back there. We stay here, we wait for the police." "They won't see it," she said. The certainty in her voice stopped me cold. "They didn't see it last night." I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out, because she was right. They hadn't. They'd seen a man, a knife, a situation, but not what had driven him there. Not what had him standing in that corner, whispering to something that wasn't supposed to be there. "Leanne," I started, but she was already moving. Slow, careful, like she knew exactly where she was going, and what she might find when she got there. I hesitated for a second. Just one. Because every part of me didn't want to follow, didn't want to see whatever she thought was back there. But then, another sound, from the same direction. Low, faint, a whisper. Not clear enough to make out words, but real. I swallowed hard and followed. The corridor felt narrower than it had before. The light harsher, the air colder. Every step echoed slightly, the sound bouncing off the walls in a way that made it feel like someone else was walking just out of sync with us. Leanne didn't stop, didn't hesitate. She moved straight to the stockroom door. The damaged frame creaked slightly as she pushed it open. Inside, the space was dimmer. One of the overhead lights flickered faintly. The shelves cast long shadows across the floor, and at the far end, the freezer room door closed. My chest tightened instantly. "Leanne," I said quietly. She didn't respond, just kept walking toward it. "No," I said, louder now. "We don't need to go in there. If someone's inside, we wait for the police." She stopped, just short of the door, then turned slightly, looking at me over her shoulder. "If it's already inside," she said, "then waiting doesn't help." The words settled heavy. I didn't have a response, because I didn't know what it was anymore, or whether I wanted to. She reached out. Her hand hovered on the freezer handle for a second. Then she pulled it open. Cold air hit instantly. Sharp, dry, the kind that burns slightly in your lungs if you breathe it too fast. The hum of the unit filled the space, low and constant. At first, I saw nothing, just stacks of crates, boxes, frost lining the edges of the walls. Then something moved, in the far corner. My breath caught, a shape, crouched low, half hidden behind the crates. For a second, I thought another person, but then it shifted, too slowly, too deliberately, like it wasn't reacting to us, like it had already been aware we were there. "Do you see it?" Leanne whispered. My throat felt tight. "Yeah," I said. But even as I said it, I realized I couldn't fully explain what I was seeing. It wasn't clear, not like a person should be. It was there, but not solid. Edges wrong, too still in some places, too fluid in others. And then it moved again, a small shift, closer. My heart slammed in my chest. "Get back," I said immediately, grabbing Leanne's arm and pulling her a step away from the doorway. The shape didn't rush us, didn't react like a person would. It just adjusted, like it was turning, like it was looking at us. My stomach twisted, because suddenly I understood something. Not fully, not clearly, but enough. The man from last night, the whispering, the way he hadn't seen the officers at first. The way this one, the one outside, kept looking past me. They weren't reacting to nothing. They were reacting to this. "Close it," I said quickly. Leanne didn't argue. She pulled the freezer door shut, hard. The latch clicked into place with a sharp, final sound. We both stepped back, breathing uneven, hearts racing. The silence in the stockroom pressed in again. But it wasn't empty anymore. Not really, because now we knew. Whatever was inside that room, it wasn't just something you could lock away. And whatever had followed her here, or maybe whatever she brought with her, it wasn't finished. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. We just stood there in the stockroom, staring at the freezer door like it might open again on its own. The hum of the unit vibrated faintly through the metal, steady, unchanged, like whatever we'd just seen wasn't trying to get out. That thought didn't help. It made it worse. Because if it wasn't trying, then maybe it didn't need to. "Callum," Leanne said quietly. I didn't look at her. "What is that?" I asked. My voice sounded different, flat, "You're tight," like something had drained out of it. She didn't answer straight away. "I don't know what it is," she said eventually, "but I know what it does." I swallowed hard. "And what's that?" She hesitated. Then it follows, she said. The word landed heavy, cold, immediate. My chest tightened again. Follows what? She looked at me then. Not past me, not toward the door, at me. People who notice it. The silence that followed pressed in hard, because that explained too much. The man from last night, the way he'd been whispering, the way he looked like he was reacting to something no one else could see. And now, me. I took a slow step back. Right, I said, though it didn't feel like I believed it. Right, so what? You're saying it's just attached to you? Her expression tightened. It was, she said. Was. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? Before she could answer, a sound cut through everything. Outside, loud, sharp, a hollow thud against the glass. My head snapped toward the corridor. Shit, I breathed. We both moved at the same time, rushing back toward the shop floor. The moment we reached the counter, I knew it had gotten worse, much worse. Petrol was everywhere, not just near the door anymore, across the front of the building, across the pumps, trailing in thin, glistening lines that caught the light and spread out in uneven patterns across the concrete. And him, he wasn't calm anymore. He was moving faster now, dragging cans, pouring without precision, like whatever control he'd had before was slipping. He's going to do it, I said, my voice tight with panic. Leanne didn't respond. She was staring at him, but not the way I was, not at what he was doing, at how he was moving, at how his head kept jerking slightly, like he was tracking something. Callum, she said. I didn't look at her. What? It's not just me anymore. That made me turn. What do you mean? But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking past me. Again, my chest tightened instantly. No, I said, no, don't do that again. Look, she whispered. I didn't want to. I really didn't. But I did anyway. I turned slowly toward the glass, toward the reflection. And there, for just a second, I saw it again. Closer this time, much closer. Right behind us, not fully formed, not clear, but watching. My breath caught. Don't move, Leanne said. Too late. Because outside, he saw it too. That's when everything broke. His movement stopped mid-action. The petrol can slip slightly in his hand, tilting just enough for the liquid to spill across his shoes. But he didn't react to that. Didn't even look down. His eyes locked on the glass, on the reflection on the thing behind us. What is that? He said. His voice had changed. All the certainty gone, replaced by something raw, something afraid. And then he stepped back, not from the building, from the reflection, like he was trying to get distance from it. It followed you, Leanne said quietly. He shook his head immediately. No, that's not. It did, she said, and now it's here. His breathing picked up, fast, uneven. That's not possible. That's not. But he couldn't finish the sentence because it moved again, in the reflection. A shift, a slight tilt, like it was adjusting to face him. Even from where I stood, I could feel it, that weight, that presence, closer than before, stronger. And outside, he broke, properly. No, he said, louder now. No, that's not what this was supposed to be. He stumbled back another step. And that was when his foot slipped, on the petrol. He went down hard, one hand hitting the ground to catch himself. The lighter flew from his grip, skidded across the wet concrete and sparked. Everything happened at once. The flame caught instantly. A sharp, violent flare, petrol igniting in a fast-moving line that raced across the ground, following the trails he'd laid down moments before. Get back! I shouted, grabbing Leanne's arm and pulling her away from the glass as the fire surged outward. Outside, he scrambled back, panic replacing everything else as the flames spread faster than he expected. They licked up the side of the pumps, caught the edge of one of the cans. The plastic warped almost immediately, collapsed, fuel spilling into the fire, making it worse, much worse. Jesus! I heard him shout, his voice breaking now. The heat hit the glass, sharp, immediate. The entire front of the building lit up in flickering orange, shadows dancing wildly across the shop floor. I dragged Leanne further back toward the counter, my heart hammering in my chest. Back door, I said. We need to get out, now! She didn't move straight away. She was still staring at the fire, at him, at something else. Callum, she started. Now! I snapped, pulling her harder this time. That broke it. She turned. We ran. Back through the corridor, toward the exit. Behind us, the fire roared louder, glass cracking under the heat. Something outside exploded, a sharp, concussive bang that echoed through the building. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what I saw just before we reached the door, a reflection. Not in glass, in the metal of the corridor panel. For a split second, I saw it again, clearer than before, closer than ever. And this time, it wasn't just watching. It was following, right behind us, and it wasn't slowing down. We didn't stop running. The back door burst open as I hit it with my shoulder, cold night air slamming into us as we stumbled out into the narrow service lane behind the station. Gravel crunched underfoot, slick with rain, and for a second I nearly went down, my balance gone from the rush of it all. "Keep going," I shouted, even though Leanne was already moving. Behind us, the sound changed. The fire wasn't contained anymore. It wasn't just a roar, it was a deep, rolling crackle mixed with the sharp pops of something inside the shop giving way. Glass, plastic, maybe worse. We put distance between us and the building, moving past the bins, past the edge of the weak security light, until the station was just a burning shape behind us. Only then did we stop. I bent forward, hands on my knees, dragging air into my lungs like I'd been underwater too long. My chest hurt, my head was ringing. Everything felt too loud and too distant at the same time. Leanne stood beside me, breathing hard, her arms wrapped tight around herself like she was holding something in place. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. We just listened. Sirens. Closer now. Multiple. Coming fast. I straightened slowly, turning back toward the station. Martin Cross was fully alight. The front was engulfed, flames rolling up past the canopy, licking at the signage, throwing thick black smoke into the sky. The forecourt lights flickered weakly beneath the glow, barely visible against the fire, and in front of it, him. He was still there, on his feet again. Staggering slightly, soaked in petrol, lit by the fire behind him. He wasn't trying to run, wasn't trying to put it out. He was just standing there, looking at something. Not the flames, not the building, something else. My stomach twisted. "Callum," Leanne said quietly. "I see him," I replied. But that wasn't what she meant. "Not him," she said. I felt it before I saw it, that same weight, that same presence. I turned slightly, just enough, and there it was again, closer than ever. Not a reflection this time. Not something caught in the corner of my eye. It was there, in the open, between us and the station, still not fully clear, still wrong in a way I couldn't explain, like it didn't belong in the space it occupied. But it was there, and it was facing him. He saw it. I knew he did, because whatever was left of his composure broke completely. "No," he said, shaking his head, backing away from it. "No, that's not. This wasn't." He stumbled, nearly falling again, hands slick as he tried to steady himself. "It wasn't meant to be me," he said louder now. "You're meant to." He didn't finish, because it moved. Not fast, not violently, just closer. And that was enough. He screamed, not a shout, not anger, a real scream. Raw, terrified, the kind of sound that doesn't come out unless something deep inside you has given way completely. He turned to run, but he slipped again. This time, he didn't get back up straight away. And the thing, whatever it was, closed the distance. I couldn't see it clearly, not properly, but I saw enough. The way the air seemed to bend around it, the way the firelight didn't hit it right, the way it didn't cast a shadow, or maybe cast too many. I took a step back, then another. "Don't look," Leanne said quickly, grabbing my arm. Too late, because even as I tried to turn away, I heard him again. Not screaming now, whispering, same as the man from the night before, same broken, distant tone, like he wasn't fully there anymore, like whatever was happening, it wasn't just physical, it was something else, something worse. "Callum," Leanne said again, more urgently now, "we need to go." I didn't argue. We turned, started moving further down the lane, away from the fire, away from him, away from it. The sirens were almost on top of us now, lights flashing at the edge of the road, voices shouting, doors slamming, the world rushing back in. But even as we moved, I felt it, that presence, still there, still close, still following. By the time the police reached us, everything blurred together, questions, voices, hands guiding us away from the scene. I tried to explain, tried to make sense of it. But the words didn't come out right. They never do. Not when something like that is involved. All they saw was the fire, the petrol, the man. They found him eventually, not far from where he fell, alive, barely, burns across his arms and legs, soaked through with fuel. But that wasn't what stuck with me. It was what they said about him. He wasn't shouting, wasn't fighting, wasn't even reacting to them properly. He was just lying there, staring past them, whispering, same as before, same as the other one. And no matter how many times they asked him what happened, he never gave them a clear answer. The station was gone by morning. What was left of it, anyway? Just a blackened shell, cordoned off with tape, the smell of smoke and burnt plastic hanging thick in the air. I stood across the road, watching it with a cup of tea gone cold in my hand, trying to process how quickly it had all happened. 2 nights. That's all it took. 2 nights for everything to go from normal to this. Lan was gone, not taken, not arrested, just gone. She gave a short statement, didn't mention anything about what we saw. Then disappeared before anyone could ask her more. No one seemed to question it much, just another detail lost in everything else. The police stuck with their version. Unstable man, domestic threat, escalation, fire. Case closed as far as they were concerned, but I knew better because I'd seen it. And once you've seen something like that, you don't unsee it. I quit the job a week later. Didn't argue when Pete asked why. Didn't try to explain. There wasn't a point. Some things don't translate into words people will believe. I moved out of the flat not long after that. New place, closer to town, more noise, more people. It helped, a bit, but not enough, because every now and then, usually late at night, I still feel it. That same shift in the air, that same sense that something is just behind me, just out of sight, and sometimes when it's really quiet, I hear it. Not footsteps, not movement, just breathing, close, steady, waiting. I've thought about what Leanne said a lot. It follows people who notice it. At first, I hoped it had stayed with him, that whatever happened out there, whatever it chose, it ended with him. But then I remembered something else, something I didn't understand at the time. The voice on the payphone. He's still deciding. I used to think that meant him, the man, the one with the petrol. But now, I'm not so sure, because if it follows people who notice it, then maybe the choice isn't his. Maybe it never was. Maybe it's mine. And if that's true, then the worst part of all this isn't what happened at that station. It's what might still be coming. Because some nights when I'm lying there trying to sleep, I get the feeling that whatever it is, whatever it wants, it hasn't made its decision yet. And when it does, I don't think there's anything I can do to stop it. If this story stirred something within you, be it a flicker of unease, curiosity, or deep reflection, please leave a comment and share your thoughts. What do you think is truly going on? Have you ever experienced a sense of uncanny familiarity like that before? If you have similar stories of your own, don't hesitate to share them. Who knows? Maybe we are all touching upon the same hidden frequency. And if you want to keep exploring these dramatic, mysterious, and multi-layered tales, please hit the like button to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming chapters. Wishing you a truly peaceful night, where everything is still in the gentlest way, and may there always be a spark of warm light somewhere waiting for you to find it.